To the Point with Michael Williams.
When you're watching television, you cannot avoid them, though I know many of you would dearly like to. The political ads you'll be seeing all the way through Election Day, all trying to win your vote, get your attention, which ones are more effective or less, and why. Good morning and welcome. Sometimes the ads are annoying. Again, I know some of you watching saying sometimes. Sometimes they can be interesting. In all the cases, the candidates hoping the millions being spent will win your vote. So we decided to critique some of the ads you're seeing each and every day for veracity, for their attention-getting power or lack therein, with a Democratic and Republican set of strategists who've worked on political campaigns. They are Alexandria Ayala, Democratic political consultant, and Blake MacDiarmid, a Republican political strategist. And we thank you for coming in. We appreciate it. The contest for Senate, one that's being watched nationally, as is the gubernatorial race and Congressional District 18. We'll begin with the Senate race, and that, of course, pits Democratic Senator Bill Nelson, Democratic Senator Bill Nelson, against two-term Governor Rick Scott, who's been termed out, now making his bid for Senate. Let's look at one of the ads, one of the strongest attack ads we've seen. The latest ad by Senator Nelson. We'll talk about that, then we'll show the ad being run against.
Rick Scott can't hide from the truth. He was CEO of a company fined $1.7 billion for Medicare fraud. He gave political donors secret contracts after Hurricane Irma that cost taxpayers $30 million. He cut education. He denied health care. It's fair to blame Rick Scott for Florida's toxic algae crisis. He made $500 million in one deal as governor and hid it from the public. Rick Scott, you just can't trust him.
I'm Bill Nelson, and I approve this message.
Can you trust him? Alexandria, your take on that set of ads. Certainly, among other issues, drudges up his time as the head of Columbia HCA Healthcare, and questions about the largest Medicare fine in history against a company. He's talking about running to clean up the swamp in Washington. Now the Nelson people going after him hard. Your take?
My take, so I think that's that tone, the tone of voice in the background with the kind of scary, ominous tone over it and the red branded label behind the words really makes a focus for the viewer on that. So I would be attracted to those words and I would be focusing on the negative connotations of them. The environmental thing hits hard. A lot of groups, activists are kind of currently blaming the administration for not stepping up and doing more for our environment.
Blake is a Republican strategist. Republicans argue old news. He was never charged with anything in the Columbia HCA debacle. They'll argue, and the governor will argue, that he's done a lot in terms of increasing funding on environmental issues and the like. And a lot of voters will always tell me, I tune it all out because it's just all mudslinging. So how much do you think it has traction from a Republican point of view?
We've heard this in 2010, 2014. This is a rehash. And I think that negative works, but negative does not work when it's black and red and gory. And to me, this, from the voice you mentioned on down, to me, it's not the way it works. Humor tends to work better in negative. In this one, I just don't think it's working.
Even given the track record, some of which is backed up, and we're going to be truth testing these ads in the run up to the election. But even then, you don't think it tells the viewer, the voter, anything new? Well,
I think we have to look at who they're trying to talk to. And I think right now you see the two bases locked in, and we're talking to independents. And independents, they don't want to see doom and gloom. They want to see a vision, and I don't think this one works. In terms of that large swath of Florida voters, we've talked about this, roughly 25 to 30% of the electorate in November in PA, no party affiliation. How do they get them to these ads? Do it. Bill Nelson, been under heavy attack from Scott campaign ads or campaigns run by the Republican National Committee on his behalf all summer long. Let's look at one of those.
I'm Rick Scott. I approve this message.
Let's go back in time to 1990. Bill Nelson looked younger, but he was saying the same thing.
I will fight to stop the poisoning of lakes and streams across this state. Lake Okeechobee is dying because of the massive dumping of pollutants.
But Bill Nelson failed. He couldn't get anything done for Lake O in Washington.
Cleaning up our environment.
Bill Nelson, he's all talk, no action. Year after year after year after year.
And that seems to be the theme again and again and again. The attack ads against Bill Nelson. Been there, done that, or not done anything, you're washed up.
A different feeling, though. A feeling that refers to his record as a public official, not his record in the private sector. And I think that it's different. And also, it's funny. You see a flip phone, you see a different phone, and you see 3 decades of things that aren't happening. People want Lake Okeechobee fixed, and you know, he hasn't done it. He's been there for a very long time.
Well, certainly the attack ad against Scott referred to part of his public record when it comes to toxic algae cleanup, when it comes to questions about money he's made while in office. Again, all this being fact-tested and truth-tested, but some of it does go very much to the heart of his public record. But you're arguing, we talked right before air, old and washed up. That seems to be the theme again and again and again against Bill Nelson. How does he counter that? Because all summer long, we've seen exactly this type of ad.
Sure.
Been there long enough, time for something new.
Sure. I think that you counter that but with your record and with actions. And when you look at the population that Senator Nelson serves, his base and his supporters and the Floridians who know what he's done will make it clear that they know that he stood up for them. He stood up for them on the environment. He stood up for them on health care. He stood up for them on women's rights over multiple generations.
Now, talk about that, because sometimes the glib, easy response is he's been there so long, name one signature thing that he authored or pushed forward. If you were sitting there with him, what would you say is the one signature issue as Florida senator for all these decades that you've really pushed forward? Because that's often the critique, that he has trouble naming that one thing that has Bill Nelson's signature all over it. Not just in support of, but pushing for.
I think something we can really appreciate about Senator Nelson is his willingness and ability to work across the aisle, though. And he's always been somebody who, as a loyal Democrat, but he always looks for ways to reach out and kind of make something happen.
Do you concede, though, he has the tougher challenge in the sense that the message, both nationally and in statewide contests, are we don't like Washington, get rid of the people who've been there, your old hat, your old news, you're part of a culture that's calcified in Washington. That's a steep mountain to climb for any candidate like him.
I understand that. As a Latina female, we're seeing a new wave of candidates and electeds come into the play, and I am excited about it. But that doesn't take away from all the work that Senator Nelson has done and will continue to do if reelected. Let's
talk about the governor's race. Talk about a bellwether race being watched. Some have argued it's really a phantom race between Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders. You have Ron DeSantis, excuse me, supported and has acknowledged that it was Donald Trump's support that landed him the nomination. Andrew Gillum, the mayor of Tallahassee, with support from Bernie Sanders, the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. Let's look at those ads. Let's take a first look at the DeSantis.
The Needham national team is going for it all. That coveted trip to the Little League World Series.
I'm Ron DeSantis. We were only 12, but we learned to dream big, work hard, and swing away. And that's my plan as governor. I'll grow high-paying jobs, restore Florida's water quality, and improve education for every child. I'm Ron DeSantis. From Dunedin to Tallahassee, I'll always go to bat for Florida.
His opponent in the primary, Commissioner Putnam, Agriculture Commissioner Putnam, said you have these big generic promises, but there's not a lot of specifics. Watching that ad, you come away with this sense, broad generic promises, but where's the beef? As one politician once famously said. What do you say to that?
Well, I think one of the attacks during the primary was Ron DeSantis wasn't Florida-centered, but I think the reality is he is, and I think this ad brings that home. And here's someone this is home for him, and he's always been a Floridian in terms of where his heart is, and I think that it reminds people that, you know, even though he's a politician, he's someone who actually is a real person. And I think, you know, the Little League bit, talking about what's happening on the West Coast, I think that does bring it home and makes it something that is a beginning. It's only the first ad, I'm sure.
Let me ask, we've seen the Nelson ad, the Rick Scott campaign against Bill Nelson, the marionette strings, you're controlled by Washington, you're basically a puppet. How does Mr. DeSantis fight the same thing, that you're a puppet for Donald Trump, and that it's really no different in some ways than the ad we see being run against Bill Nelson?
I don't think anyone's going to think that Ron DeSantis is a puppet of anyone. I think he's a former JAG officer. He's someone who is his own man, and I think his results in the primary and now into the general election, clearly he's not going to bite on that, and I don't think the people in the middle, the independents that are looking at this race, are going to see it that way.
Let's also look at the Gillum ad. Let's take a look.
I can still hear my grandmother's voice. She'd say, go to school, mind your teachers, and one day bring that education home. She knew that a good public education could change everything. That's why, as mayor, I improved early childhood education in every neighborhood. And as governor, I'll raise teacher pay and expand career and skills training. I'm Andrew Gillum, and that's how we bring opportunity home for everyone. Let's bring it home, Florida.
Does it resonate, Alexandria? And the clear thing that jumps out, at least from the ads we've picked thus far, big attack ads in the Senate race thus far, ads about what I can do for you. I love Florida. I'm rooted in Florida. I can do more for you in the Gillum ad. Your take?
I do appreciate that. I think that the Gillum ad had a sense of togetherness and the DeSantis ad had a sense of what I've done. I think that's a difference that Floridians will take. He really brought that, how together we can make Florida better, and how he's also homegrown. But DeSantis kind of talked about how it's him.
Are we kidding ourselves if we think that the attack ads won't soon begin with both of these? We've heard some attacks outside of the ads on both sides of the ledger here. Are viewers kidding themselves if they think it's going to stay all positive and above board with these two for the duration?
I wouldn't say too hopeful about that.
Let me ask you, because I want to get in the ads for Congressional District 18, a pivotal race, again, a race that's being watched nationally. Democrats hope to pick up, I think it's 23 seats to flip the House. It's one of the seats that's gone back and forth over the years that they hope to pick up. Let's look at the ads in the Brian Mast and Lauren Bear race, the Republican incumbent against the Democratic challenger. Let's take a look with the Bear ad.
My daughter Meredith has chronic epilepsy. She was 6 months old when she had her first seizure. It's incredibly expensive. Not all medications are covered by insurance.
When Brian Mast voted to take away protections for people with pre-existing conditions, how did that make you feel?
It hurt because every family has a Meredith.
What keeps you fighting every day?
Look at that face.
Face to fight for?
It is a face to fight for.
I'm Lauren Bear, and I approve this message.
Democrats all in on the health care message. There was a Wall Street Journal article this week that talked about it being a pivotal issue. Indeed, when we had them in for debate earlier, I asked them, what's your biggest issue? Thinking algae crisis. We were in the middle of it this summer. Health care was the first thing she talked about. You see her hammering away on that here. Talk about that. Is that central issue that she's pushing for this campaign?
Absolutely. CD18, the central issues are going to be healthcare, they're going to be the environment, and they're going to be senior issues. The population is older in CD18, and I think that she's right to focus on healthcare. Floridians have seen at the state level and at the national level access to their healthcare cut back, and she wants to fight for it. How's she going to be countered by the incumbent Brian Mast? Because she's made it clear she's going to hammer and hammer and hammer away on health care access.
Well, the reality is health care, we had a big overreach, and we've turned that around. I'm a leukemia survivor. That ad, that doesn't resonate with me. It should resonate with me. It doesn't. I think that we're making changes. It's not easy, and I think that you're going to find that this is just one issue of many, and I think it doesn't cut the way that this ad thinks it should.
The Brian Mast ad, let's take a look.
When I became your congressman, my promises became my mission. To protect seniors, I passed legislation to crack down on crimes which target seniors and strengthen Medicare. For our veterans, my bill averted crisis by protecting veterans' health care programs. And I've secured hundreds of millions of dollars to combat toxic algal blooms and protect our environment. I know my mission is not over. That's why I'm asking for your support to stay in the fight. I'm Brian Mast, and I approve this message.
Alexandria, how do you run against a guy who, interwoven in the ads, a very clear example of his service and sacrifice, which very clear for all to see, combat veteran, nearly lost his life in his service. Somebody says, I fought for toxic algae relief and money for that. I'm fighting for vets. That's a big hill to climb if you're challenging him. Talk about his ad.
Sure, and I thank Congressman Mast for his service, absolutely. I think that Lauren Bear has had another fight, though. She served the people of this country working in the State Department, and she also can speak to that level of service when it comes to constituents. It's not the same as being a veteran and serving at that highest honor, but I think that she also has an understanding of what the people of this country and this district need to have good lives.
Worked for the State Department under the Obama administration. That can cut both ways for her, given all the controversies with whichever party is in power at the time. She has another ad where she says, I'm running, being a woman will no longer be a pre-existing condition. Very clear, the slice of the electorate, hammering home on the issues, health care, women issues, and the like. From your perspective, as a Republican strategist, that ad and the overall arc of the Mast campaign?
Probably the best I've seen this cycle so far. I think it takes it right to the middle. It talks about environmental issues. It talks about health care in a positive way. You know, this is a congressman who bucked his own party on the gun issue. And I think that 18 is certainly a swing district. And I think that this ad just shows that he's willing to be a different kind of Republican in this district.
Just very briefly, P, in 10 seconds each, are ads really, as much as we may not like it as journalists and people studying these issues, are these really what are going to frame the issues and make up the minds for people? These ads really drive their thinking at the end of the day?
First, people have to have cable, so that we're looking at an older population who will be swung by these.
Well,
second of all, I think that contact face-to-face with voters and digital is what's going to really swing them.
She was staring very hard at the old guy with gray hair. I still have cable. I have a phone, too, believe it or not, a smartphone. Go ahead.
TV still works. TV is still the way to get through in a statewide race. We're a huge state, the most important state in the country. TV still works.
I thank you both, the strategist. I thank you for the youthful and professional and eloquent perspective on both sides. We hope to have you both back as the campaign moves on. Thank you very much for your insights today. We appreciate it. I'm going to go get my smartphone working. Coming up, some interesting developments in the race for governor. Our roundtable takes up that and more when we come back.